Welcome back everyone. This is a video for those of you out there who would like to find the time to read more books but haven't quite managed it yet. I'll be sharing 5 tips plus 1 meta tip on how to read more books. A few years ago I barely read any books myself. After starting university I struggled to read, and it was only last year, the year before, that I started to get back on track with my reading, and it was by doing some of these tips and embedding them into my reading habits. So hopefully you'll find these useful and they'll help you read more like they helped me. Number 1. Read multiple books at the same time. Now this might seem counterintuitive. If you're reading lots of books at the same time, you might think, well, isn't that just going to take more time to get through all of these books? And some people do say that they struggle with focusing on more than one book at any one time, but if you do want to read more, I think this is a very good strategy to employ. If you're just doing one book after the other, then you might find that when you're reading a book, if it's a boring book, if you don't really like it, if it's a bit dry, when it comes to thinking about reading, you're going to be thinking about reading that particular book, and if you're not enjoying that book, you're going to be putting off the habit. You're not going to be reading the book because you don't like it. However, if you have 2 or 3 books on the back burner that you are maybe enjoying a bit more, then when you think about reading, you're going to be thinking about those books that you do enjoy, so you're going to be more likely to go for one of those books. So if you have more books that you're reading currently, when you're thinking about reading, you're going to be thinking about a selection of books that you can go to, and it's going to be more likely that you're going to be motivated to read over time because you have more things that you're currently reading so you can enjoy those books. I do this myself. I'll usually be reading at least 1 classic, 1 gothic novel or horror novel, and 1 fantasy novel. And also, because of my PhD work, I'll usually be reading 1 philosophy book, and I also try and read 1 non-fiction book. So at any one time I could be reading 5 books. But it's great because when I think about reading a book, I think about all 5 of those books, and if there's one that's not really tickling my fancy right now, I'll pick up one of the other 4. One last thing that I would suggest on this is to try and pick at least different styles of books, if not different genres. Again, I think that diversity in different kinds of novels will again inspire you to read more often because you have a broader range to choose from. Tip number 2 is kind of a double tip, but it's either use audiobooks or carry books around with you, physical books, or do both. So when I wanted to take reading a bit more seriously, I downloaded Audible, and that helps me read so much more, or listen in this case, so much more books over time. The reason why audiobooks are so effective is because they allow you to get through books at times when you wouldn't normally be able to. When you're walking around, you can just have your headphones in, you can be listening to an audiobook. When you're cooking, when you're sitting on the toilet, whatever it is, you can do it anywhere you like. And that's really good because it allows you to read at different times where you wouldn't normally be able to. If you can't afford an Audible subscription or audiobooks on their own, because audiobooks on their own are very expensive, then I would suggest just carrying books around with you. There are so many times in the day when you'll be bored waiting for someone, for instance, and normally you'll just go on your phone and maybe just look around on Facebook and not really do anything. Now that can be fine, but maybe if you want to read more, a good thing to do there would be to have a book at hand so you can just pick up the book and get in a few extra pages. Again, I found that once I started carrying a book with me, and when I started listening to audiobooks, because I was reading at more times that I wouldn't normally read at, I was able to get through books a lot quicker. Step number 3 is to habituate a reading pattern. So as with any activity that you want to start and make a part of your life, the key way to get on board with that thing and to do it well is to make it a habit. If you can habituate reading, then you won't need to use your willpower to read, you'll just naturally read at those times. For me, I did this by habituating reading at particular times. So the first thing I said was, I'm going to turn my computer off an hour before bed, I'm going to go to bed and I'm going to read for an hour every night before I go to sleep. Now that worked really effectively, and now I don't even think about that. When it comes to around 10 o'clock, unless I'm out with friends or something, I'll just pick up a book, go to bed and read for an hour. And that's now a habit. Once you've got that one habit, you can then move on to other habits. Maybe you want to read in the morning with your morning coffee. Maybe you want to habituate reading if you've got kids just after they've gone to bed to wind down. There are all different times at which you might think, that's a good slot to read, and develop a habit. Again, this is really good for building consistency with your reading, if you're reading at the same time every day, and like I say, once you've habituated something, you'll find it a lot easier to just naturally read at those times, rather than having to use your willpower. Tip number 4 requires a little bit of organisation, and also having some friends who are also interested in books, but it is to start a reading club. I started a reading club myself about 1.5 years ago with some friends. We met at university, and we wanted to keep in touch, and we thought a good way to keep in touch would be to start a reading club. We read 1 book every 4 weeks, sometimes it's 5 or 6 depending on how long it is, but usually once a month we read a book, and then we'll discuss that book. For me, this means that I'm guaranteed to read at least 12 books a year, because I've made a commitment to read a book with these friends every month, and obviously if you make a commitment to other people rather than yourself, you're going to be more motivated to meet that commitment. So that's why starting a reading club can be really useful. If you're making a commitment to someone, you might be more likely to make good on that commitment. Not only is this good for reading more books, but it's also quite good for socializing and also taking books into a more social atmosphere. I often find it's quite rare to find people who've read books that I've read, because a lot of people that I know don't read or just don't read the things that I read. But having a book club means that you have then a common core of books that you've read among those friends, and you can talk about them, you can get into it, and it's a lot more fun and makes the reading experience more enjoyable. Also, I'd recommend doing what my book club do, which is allow one person to pick a different book every time. I know there are some reading book clubs where one person just dictates what they'll read, and I don't know why, but I don't think that's particularly good. I think it's much better and more interesting to have a different person pick every week, because then you can account for different people's tastes, what their preferences are, and you might read books that you just otherwise wouldn't have read. I know I've read things that I wouldn't have even considered reading or even knew about until I started the book club. Final tip is to try speed reading. Now, there's a lot of rubbish when it comes to speed reading. There's a lot of kind of myths of people reading, 10,000 words in a minute, and that's not what I'm really saying when I'm talking about speed reading. Instead, what I'm talking about is the ability to make your reading more efficient, and that can be done with a few techniques, and I'll tell you the one that I employ and how that's changed my ability to read a lot quicker while still maintaining comprehension. Now, I might do a video on speed reading some other time. If you're interested in that, let me know in the comments, but I'll quickly go through my speed reading method. So I have a book here and I have a guide, and I use this guide to track the line that I'm reading on. And I find the guide is incredibly useful because it allows my eyes to keep focus on the particular line that I'm focusing on, rather than letting my eyes wander, because for me at least I can get very distracted and I find I have to go back and read things over and over again. The guide is really useful in tracking what you're reading and keeping your eyes focused and your attention alert. It also allows you to change your reading speed. You can go quite slowly by moving the guide quite slowly, but then you can speed up. Now, I'm not going to go through the exact technique with the guide. You can look at how to do speed reading online. There are tips, and I might do, like I say, I might do a video on that more fully. But if you use a guide and then slowly you kind of train yourself to read faster and faster, and instead of just taking in one word, you take in the words around the word that the guide is focusing on, then through time you'll be able to read a lot faster and more efficiently. Again, there is a lot of nonsense when it comes to speed reading, so definitely be aware of that if you're going to do a bit of investigation into how to speed read, but it is a very effective tool in reading a little bit faster, and it's something that it's taken me about a year, maybe more, to actually be able to do effectively. When I first started speed reading, I wasn't really comprehending what was going on, but now after doing that and training my eye to follow the guide and doing that quite quickly, I've been able to read a lot faster and hence get through more books. Okay, so that's it for my 5 tips. Now is my 6th one, which is, like I said, a kind of meta tip if you like, and it's to do with the approach to trying to read more books. Basically, whatever you choose to do, whether you choose to do any of these tips on this list or anything else that you're aware of, the thing to do is to start small. Don't immediately rush into this and do all of the things that I've said, trying to habituate reading at 5 different times in a day, picking up 10 books to read at the same time, starting a book club, all of these things at once. You don't want to overwhelm yourself with any activity that you want to learn and get good at. Once you overwhelm yourself with something, you quickly lose interest in it, you get anxiety about it, and it all just kind of goes to hell. The thing to do is to just pick one thing that you think you'd be able to do. So let's say you think that the audiobook thing would be a great idea. Well, then you just get an Audible subscription or start buying audiobooks, and you just listen to them maybe instead of listening to Spotify or whatever music player you use when you're out and about. And then once you've kind of done that, and that becomes kind of a natural thing that you just gravitate towards when you go out and you're putting your headphones in, then you might try one of the other tips. Maybe you have some friends who are interested in a reading club. Well, then you start a reading club and you read a book maybe once every month, maybe once every 6 weeks, depending on your needs. But then you'd start that, and then you kind of build up from there. I think this is probably the most important tip, and it's something that you should carry on towards any kind of hobby that you enjoy. If you start small and build from there, then you'll find that over time, like any kind of exercise, you'll build that muscle of reading consistently, reading with friends, whatever it is, and you'll find that overall you end up reading more, and it's much easier to do. Okay, that's it for today's video. I hope this was helpful to you, and I hope it allows you to read more books, because following these tips has certainly allowed me to read more books. Please let me know what you think of this video in the comments below, and if you liked this video, please subscribe for more content. I post new videos twice a week, once on a Monday and once on a Thursday. Take care guys, and I'll see you all in the next video.